What's up, guys? So I'm going to go over some stuff about training that I think will really give you guys a lot of fundamentals to build your training blocks, set your recovery around your training, and also to build your nutrition around your training styles. That I think will really give you guys some good concepts on how to go about this. That'll help you guys make better progress as you go. So, and then for my existing clients, just to shed light on why we do things the way we do, because I do get questions a lot about why we're not changing training blocks up as often, and why we stay in the same training exercise selection and stuff for periods of time. And some people talk about how that they're not motivated with this when they're not getting new stuff and changing the things up as they go in the gym every day. So first with that, I really want to emphasize the importance of training progressively and training with a consistent exercise selection, not only for trackability and being able to gauge progress, but also to give yourself time to really get acclimated to what you're doing. And that way you can really take advantage of each exercise as you get better working with these compounds. So to me, it's just a no-brainer to train this way. I know growing up with sports that I know a lot of you guys come from a background of playing sports. Most everyone played sports as a kid. And this is really easy, a real easy analogy to use to get people to understand why it is so important to stay consistent with what you're doing. And if you think back when you're in high school or junior high, whenever you're playing sports, when you went in each day, you had a set structure for how your practices work. And, you built upon these things as the season went along with whatever sport you're in. In the first phases, you start your off-season stuff where you're working more conditioning and some strength training. And then you get into your actual training and you start working more fundamentals towards that sport. And then you just really get in a set system of where you come in and you work this, these fundamentals, and then you practice live play experiences to where you're playing in a game. Or for me with wrestling, like I said, you come in, you warm up and you go over different moves, and it's the same process, the same stuff every single day. Then you wrestle live, then you do conditioning, and it was the same thing all season long. And you never went around looking for new things or new ways to practice or new approaches to reinvent the wheel to make it more fun. You just bought into this concept and you got better at this over time, and you worked really hard in the fundamental stages to get better with each of these fundamentals, and it showed up more on game day. The same thing applies. I don't care if your goals are bodybuilding, or if you're more of a powerlifting driven or strength athlete driven client, to where like I said, you may not have a physique-driven goal, but the concept for training remains the same amongst all of these. So we're going to talk about, why progressive overload. And again, to piggyback off of what I've already said, when you're working with the same exercise selection week to week in the same rep ranges, with the same tempos, with the same disciplines within your rep execution, this allows you to have a wide range to gauge what's going on within your physique. And especially for those of you that, if you are a bodybuilder or you are a physique-driven athlete, that, a lot of times in the off season, some people's body fats get a lot higher than others. And it's really hard to see progress when body fat gets over a certain percent. Me and my buddy Sid were just talking about this last week, where in certain areas where you don't carry as much body fat, you can really track and see your results as you're growing in the off season. But For him and myself, both, we carry a lot of fat in our back. And there comes times you got to just really check yourself, because if you don't have other ways of gauging progress, if you're just looking in the mirror, as you accumulate more fat, you can actually look smaller and look as if you're losing muscle tissue, when the reality is the complete opposite is going on. So if you have a good gauging system, and you're truly taking sets to failure within the parameters that are disciplined in your exercise program, again, tempos, rep execution, depth, rep range, working in the same selection, so fatigue is at the same point at each time. This gives you a ton of trackability as you go along week to week. So again, not only does it allow you to progress better within these lifts and get better with these lifts and maximize the results you can get off each of one of these exercises, the biggest thing is it gives you some trackability in the off season when body fat is high to gauge what's going on. Because if the weight's going up and you're increasing the loads, you're increasing the reps, and you're just more efficient with these exercises, I promise you this is going to translate over to your physique. So that's the biggest reason I think, in my opinion, working in a progressive overload state is so important. And then again, it just creates a disciplined training program for you to work from. Once you find some exercises that work really well for you, rather than just going and trying to recreate the wheel every week to have just fun when you're in the gym, this allows you to really dig deep and get the most out of what you're doing. So, and for me, if I was to go back and just train just random, whatever the fuck I felt like doing every time I went in, that wouldn't be fun at all, because I'm not tracking anything. And I enjoy pushing myself to the limit and taking sets to failure and then trying to beat that the next week. I love that anxiety laying in bed the night before or at breakfast the morning of, when you're thinking of your training session that day. And honestly, days that are hard to eat, or you're not wanting to be hydrated and stuff, this pushes you to do better with your nutrition and stuff too, because you're constantly in that game of you versus you, trying to beat yourself week to week as you progress. And then you go into various stages, with your food intake, or your if you're an enhanced athlete with hormones in and out, and in these down times when things aren't as optimal and you're fighting to make progress or to continue at least staying where you're at, this mindset alone is going to give you so much adaptability with your physique just by pushing and working so hard, that I feel if you take this off the table, you eliminate a lot of these drivers that push you to be better within your program. So for me, that's why progressive overload is king. And it's something that'll always be a staple in my training blocks with whatever I'm doing. And that again goes with any athlete, whether it's physique driven, powerlifters, everything. I have a few powerlifting athletes that are just blowing through new PRs all the time and reaching numbers that wasn't even a thought, when they started with me 6 months prior. And we're just doing powerlifting blocks, and they come into doing my training blocks and have made massive progress. So I know the way I write and program training works really well all around for strength, adding muscle tissue, whatever it is you're after. I'm telling you, these concepts are going to work for you. So really try to home into this and buy into this mindset and work hard within those training blocks. And then, with that, now obviously you're not just going to do the same shit for the rest of your life, but so when to change exercise selection. So for me, when I start a new block, the first week when I'm training, I always set baseline parameters. So with that, I mean, I go in and I strictly focus on the way I have each exercise laid out. So if I have, like I said, maybe like a 3-second tempo, say on a leg press, and I'm talking about taking these reps deep as you can for a set of 8 or whatever it might be. That first week, my biggest focus is going to be on exaggerating that 3-second tempo. I may even have a 4-second negative or eccentric when it's programmed for 3 seconds. I may pause in the hole a little bit. I may take things even a little bit deeper, just exaggerating my range of motion. And I take this to failure within these extreme disciplines. And then from there, I back off a little bit on the execution aspect, and I really start working the load week to week from there. So, and by backing off, I don't say that I go from saying I have a 3-second eccentric on a leg press going 3 to 4 seconds on week 1 and then dropping it to none on the next week. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just saying that when I'm first setting these baseline parameters with all my lifts, that is a huge focal point to get a good base set. And then from there, I have something to work from progressively week to week. And so I'm always still trying to stay within what's written. But as I get late in these training blocks, around week 5, week 6, week 7, some of these negatives may have dropped inside, 2 seconds. But I'm still actively lowering the weight and pressing the weight. I'm not just dropping and banging it out. I'm still taking it to full depth. I'm just prioritizing load over execution to some degree so I can really advance the load. And you'll watch as I work through these training programs, you'll see when I start a new one where my baseline is set at, by the time I get to the end of it, my weight has progressed massively through that. And something else I like to do, if you're training in a training block and you're set up and some things are going good and some things aren't going as good, and you have exercises that you're just week after week for 2 to 3 weeks that you're either you're pushing hard as hell and you're getting the same reps and your execution's starting to fade, or even you might be falling off and you're starting to get to where you're not able to hit it by a rep each week. This is a time that I feel like you've really utilized everything you can within that exercise and that rep range. And so what I'll do is I'll go in and vary my rep range. Like if I'm working from a 6 to 8 rep range, I may come in that next week for a few weeks and bump that to 10 to 12 reps and try to work as hard as I can within that rep range, and then slowly start working the reps back down. And I'm able to muster out a little more weight by the end of the training program than I was stuck at. So it's just a way to utilize a little more progress within that block. But at some point, you do eventually get to a point where that exercise selection, you've milked and marinated everything you can out of that, and taken it for what it's worth, and like I said, pulled every ounce of progress you can out of it. And then there's a time to change. And I typically, in my opinion, I think this normally happens around 6, typically more like 8 weeks. And then I'll typically change a programming up. I'll run training programs typically from 6 to 10 weeks before adjusting exercise selection. And by that, I don't mean I go and I throw everything away I've been doing and start fresh with all new stuff. What I mean is I may change the order of what I'm doing, add an exercise, drop an exercise, maybe an exercise that's not feeling good anymore, or I can tell is causing a problem with my mobility, or like I said, just a joint having issues with a certain exercise. I may toss that, throw another exercise in, and change the selection up and change the rep ranges, and then blast off from there too. So like you guys see, it's something that I used to say was for pussies. And honestly, this was just before I knew more about training, but you guys see I utilize the Smith machine a lot. And I absolutely love the Smith machine. It allows me to push things and target muscle groups so much more isolated than working on a free bar, whether it's a squat, a bench, whatever it might be, and staying within a pattern and really targeting a certain muscle group rather than just like with a squat, allowing your hips to take over and becoming more of a hinge movement when you get really heavy and you're pushing the loads. Or with the bench, your shoulders start folding under and your ass comes off the pad and you're just doing everything to get the weight up. With the Smith machine, you can really lock yourself into a set plane of motion and really target that motion. I feel like you can take the load much further on that isolated muscle to grow that muscle. And in return, if you're a strength athlete, when you're doing this for a while, when you go back to the barbell, I promise you, every time I've done this with any client of mine, whatever exercise that is goes way up when you go back to it after working really strict with intent on the Smith machine. So I love the fucking Smith machine. You see it in my programs a lot. You'll see me beat the hell out of a lot of the same exercises, and that's because I've found exercises that I really have learned how to use well. And when it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of mentality. So and then how to properly work consistent within exercise selection. I feel like we kind of already went over that. So back to the same things I just said, working within that rep range, building your baseline that first week, and then just working to progress that load or get another rep at that load. If you can't add more weight, if you're working for a set of 6 to 8 and you hit and you set a baseline at 300 pounds for 6 reps, and then by week 4 you're at 340 pounds and you're at 6 reps and you don't feel like you can push the load anymore. Maybe the next week you stay 340 pounds and you try to get 7 reps, and the next week you push for 8 reps, the high end of that rep range. All of this is working progressively. And then if your reps are just getting cleaner and your tempos are getting smoother and you're isolating that muscle better and working within that same rep range, that's still a way of progression too. So all of this is just signs of making progress. And that's what we're trying to accomplish week to week, is that we don't go in and end up in the same place, or even worse, fall back from where we were, that we're progressing in some way each week within this training system. And now we have something to track as far as progress when body fat's high and you can't really see it. So how to prioritize food demands in both caloric surpluses and deficits. So for me, it's honestly the same principles both ways. I'm a firm believer in rolling macronutrients. Nutrients. Now, protein, taking it as high as you safely can with each individual without having digestion issues or any signs of anything causing any problems. And keeping it in that rep range, or in that range of intake, and typically for me, it's usually about 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I have some athletes that they're able to push, 2 grams, even 2 plus sometimes, and then you have some that have issues. Me, for example, that sometimes it's closer to 1 gram to 1.25 grams of protein a day per pound of body weight. And that's just, you learn what people can handle and where they're most efficient. And that's where you try to set that. But you always want your protein to be as high as you can. I've never seen anyone get huge or get shredded eating low amounts of protein. It's just not going to happen. So you want to keep that as high as you can. And then around that, I prioritize my high carb days, 2 to 3 high carb days a week, based on output demand. And so for me, most training blocks with most of my clients, it's going to be on your leg and back day, that just require the most demand, unless I have a client that has some really lagging body parts, and I might adjust their training program some to acclimate more demand on that body part, and then also give them more food, so keep their carbs higher on those days. And then I like to have, moderate food days the rest of the training days, where carbs are brought down, kind of flip-flop, fats are a little higher, and then I bring carbs way down. And then on non-training days, it just depends if you're in a surplus or if you're in a deficit, but on non-training days, if someone's dieting, I'll bring all the macronutrients way down besides protein, and really just try to utilize those as fat burning and recovery days. And then, if you're in your off season, both macros as far as fat and carbs become more moderate with higher proteins still. So that's kind of how I like to prioritize the food around the training. I know a lot of good coaches that do the same thing. So this is a good concept to follow. You have to play with it to kind of figure out where you need to be. But I really feel these are the best methods to go about this. And then, it's just know-how. So if you don't know how to do it, that's why there's those of us out here that do get paid to coach you guys. So if all this interests you and you have no clue how to go about it, I highly recommend hiring a coach. Myself, for one, I work really close with my athletes, both with the training aspect. I literally have you reporting and checking your training daily. And, as far as if you're wondering how I set up my nutrition, this pretty much covers how most of my clients' training and nutrition is handled. Unless there's, like I said, if there's health elements that don't allow us to do this and we have to do different styles of dieting and stuff too, that's obviously going to be a factor. But I would say 80-90% of the time, this is how I like to run things. So, and then lastly, how to prioritize rest properly. This is a huge one that I feel is neglected by most everyone that trains. But if you ever get this in check, I'm telling you, this is going to be a huge push to your progress. And for me, I've found as I've gotten older, I require a lot more rest demand than I used to. When I was younger, I could train 5-6 days a week pretty hard all the time and not only still make progress, but not feel just totally trashed all the time by doing so. And now if I train outside of, honestly, there's a lot of weeks I only train 4 days, but if I train more than 5 days, I'm a wreck. So for me, I like to train 2 to 3 days consistent and then take a rest day. Unless I'm really beat up and I can tell I'm needing to deload, I'll utilize, consecutive rest days in those periods. But typically speaking, I like to prioritize rest behind those high demand training days. So again, for me, like my leg workouts and my back workouts, where if you guys follow me, you see how hard I train. And I typically like to take a rest day behind those days. I've noticed that if I try to train the following day, I don't have anything in the tank. Everything feels off. I'm just forcing the workout and typically leave frustrated. So like right now for me, I'll train my push session on Monday, my compound leg session on Tuesday. I'm resting on Wednesdays. I had a rest day today. Thursdays I'll typically train I'll either train my upper body volume day, depending how recovered my legs are, or the way I like to do it, if my legs have enough in them, I like to come back and hit my back day after my rest day on Thursday. And then I'll train Friday, either the upper body volume or back, whichever one I didn't do. And then on Saturday, I'll go ahead and hit my volume leg day where I don't really take anything anywhere near failure. Just really squeezing on things and moving things around. And then Sundays, I rest every week. And again, I talked about this on my social media today. So, a lot of people, you guys will want to train 5 days straight and just take the weekend off because it's fun. And that's, I get that. But if you're really trying to recover and utilize your recovery for your progress, because again, if you're training your ass off and you're not recovering, you're just training your ass off and staying sore all the time. So without making progress, if you're training your ass off and you're getting fully recovered, the recovery phase is where you're making all your progress. So prioritizing this is extremely important. I think it's crazy if you're going to be in there busting your ass training, and then you just don't have enough discipline in your off days that you want to train straight through and then take the whole weekend off, jicking off, falling off your meal plan, drinking, things of that nature, and you wonder why you're not making progress and you feel like shit and full of inflammation all the time. Well, the answers are right there in the execution. So maybe figure this out and find a way to make it match up for both your life and your recovery. And like I said, like I do, so for Sundays, I like to take that day off, or like I said, family time, the girlfriend, different things like that, church, all these things. And so that's a day 9 times out of 10, I don't train unless, something goes wrong on my week and it doesn't happen. And then again, I've set my week up to where Wednesdays is a good day that I can work more and do some other things and shoot these content videos, and not have to worry about fitting the training and stuff in too. So that works best for me. I would set your training days up however they work best for you. And if you have days of your week that are just higher demand with work, family, whatever it is, I would work your training program built to where your day previous is a big compound day, high demand day. And then that way you're able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, recover and live your best life without having to worry about training that day. So yeah, that's what I got for you guys. I'm telling you, there's some great nuggets in here if you really dig in and pull things out of what I just told you guys. I feel like you guys can make a lot of progress. If you guys do need a coach, don't hesitate to holler at me. I'm really pushing to grow right now. I got a lot of cool stuff going on with my website getting built right now. We're really pushing out more content. We got a lot of good stuff happening, and we're ready to bring on more clientele. So if you guys are looking for a coach, holler at your boy, get in my DM, or email me at marcus@m1elitecoaching.com. And if not, like I said, utilize this stuff and what you guys are doing. I promise you're going to start making more progress. So hope you enjoy it. You guys have a great week.